PC on me. There's synths.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, how come? Why is Star Trek now so political? All right.
God, no. We're not going to get into that.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's my bad. But seriously, everybody.
But yeah,
always been.
I thought it was super cute, and yeah, I enjoyed this whole bit.
Cool. Yeah. So I thought it was really sweet. She also talks about her friend Captain Crandall, who lives on another part of the planet. She says he's older than Picard. And then they have this whole conversation, which I feel like it was such weird timing because Picard's like, oh, yeah, or excuse me, Soji says that he's a friend of the man that is supposed to be her father. And he says, well, her father is Zeta. And so right away, Kestra's like, oh my gosh, you're an android then. And Soji seems to freak out, oh, what? What are you talking about? And then Picard's like, it's okay, calm down. Your sister was an android too. By the way, she's dead, sorry. And I just felt like, is this the right time to it just felt very, it's a little insensitive that Picard was like, oh, by the way, Daj is dead, sorry.
That's not the only time that he seemed kind of uncharacteristic. Like the time where they were in the garden and he walks up and he's kind of mocking her about. Yeah. I didn't really. I didn't get it. I understand we needed that scene so she could shove him or be angry, but I just didn't think any of that was Picard-like. I thought it was a little clunky, but maybe it was clunky by design. I don't know.
Well, he, when he's talking to Riker, he says something about. He's kind of acting like maybe he did get a little over his head at times, but so I think maybe that could be part of it, is that he's gotten into this a little more than he meant to, because his whole plan just went away.
Right.
So
well,
maybe just making him act, uncharacteristically.
Well, remember too that there's a conversation, I think it's the same conversation that you're talking about, Brooke, where Riker says to Picard, oh, it's that famous Picard, oh, shoot, it's that famous Picard arrogance.
Arrogance, yeah, I was going to say it wasn't hubris, but arrogance, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, but it reminds me back to an earlier episode where when Picard shows up at Starfleet, it was we saw in the trailer even, and he's like, "Oh, can I have a ship and all these in this crew? I'm going to go do this thing, and oh, you could even demote me if you want to. It's okay." And the admiral's like, "The hubris," And she throws in another word there, but we're trying to keep this family friendly. She says the hubris, and here's another moment where another person is telling Picard, you are so arrogant, you are so full of yourself, and Riker is calling him on it. And I think that moment you're talking about, Steve, where he shows up in the garden and he's like, oh yeah, this is all some elaborate ruse just to trick you to do the thing, and she shoves him. I love that Troy calls him on it.
Definitely.
She says to him, you had that coming.
Yeah. She says, a ship's counselor probably shouldn't say this. Yes. But you had it coming. I thought that was great.
Well, she was never really that shy about telling him what he was doing wrong in Next Gen. But this definitely feels aged. And I think they did a really good job with it. This feels like a 20-year jump where she doesn't actually report to him anymore. And she's just like, yeah, by the way, maybe I've wanted to say this several times to you in the past, but you definitely had that coming.
Right.
And she was kind of proud to say it. By the way, while we're talking about that scene, I guess we jumped ahead, but when we were listening to the panel where the actress that plays Soji, Isa Briones, is that how you say it?
Briones, I believe.
Briones. Remember, she was talking about how the very first scene she ever that she already filmed, that she had to yell at Patrick Stewart, and it made her very nervous that she had to yell at him. I guess she progressed, because here she's pretty violently shoving him. And I almost want to wish we could be at that panel again to ask about that scene, because if you were afraid a month ago to yell at him, you've kind of relaxed yourself because now you're shoving him. And I thought that was pretty good progression for her.
Yeah, for sure. We see in this episode, to me, I think we see so much growth in Soji, because not only is she becoming aware of what and who she is, but she's also having to overcome her trust issues, right? And there's another, we're bouncing around a lot here, which is fine, but there's that other scene right before the shoving scene that we just talked about, where basically Troy and Soji have like a counseling session. And I actually really loved this scene. I thought it was some of the best stuff I've seen the writers give Marina Sirtis to do as Deanna Troi. Because in the show, there were a lot of missed opportunities, I think, to really let her shine as a really good mental health professional. So then to see her now still using those skills and then being able to show them off in a way, because the writing is different and better, then I love that she basically helps Soji to work through her feelings of being betrayed and being used, because she talks about how Narek said he loved her and betrayed her and used her and then tried to kill her. Is it any wonder she has trust issues? I mean, who wouldn't have trust issues after that? And then finding out that everything you believed is to be true is a lie, and you're only 3 years old and you're actually an android. I mean, I think anybody would have a breakdown and be like, I can't trust anyone. But I really like how Troy helps her kind of process those feelings and start to work through them.
I definitely like the fact that she brought up the fact that you being nice and sweet, the sweeter and nicer you are to me, the less I'm going to trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can't imagine somebody that had gone through some like really major trauma as a child being in that situation, like having the trust in the adult and the sweetness and everything that came from the adult that ultimately resulted in something terrible. Well, that receiving that niceness from somebody again would trigger something in your head. And I really thought that was cool how they brought that to light.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's see where we were. So, they finally arrive. Okay, so we talked about how Picard just kind of springs on Soji that Daj is dead. And so they make their way to the house. And this is where we first see Deanna Troi. She's like doing some gardening or whatever, and then she sees Picard come around the corner, and she gets this really beautiful smile on her face, and she goes, she's there, and she has her arms wide open, like for a big hug and a kiss. And I thought this was a very touching reunion. I thought it was very sweet, and like you said earlier, Steve, that this is more aged. All the characters have aged, at least 20 years here, and it's nice to see them. And she calls him Jean-Luc. She doesn't call him Captain or Admiral. So yeah, I really loved this scene where they're first reunited. It was very touching. So then after he reunites with Troy, she knows right away he's in some kind of trouble. And then it seems like she seems to understand or sense that he's sick. Of course, referring to the diagnosis he got early on, that he had a thing wrong in his brain that could lead to having some kind of a syndrome, a neurological disorder. She seems to sense that there's more happening there.
Do you think, I guess, maybe if he was, since she's like sort of telepathic, that maybe he's thinking, don't tell her I'm sick, don't tell her, or something, like there's something.
Definitely. I agree with that, Brooke, 100%. I think that he is conscious of like trying to shield her from this fact that he has a terminal illness. And of course, the more you think about it, the more you try not to think about it, the more you're going to think about it. And she picked up on it. So I agree with that 100%, Brooke.
Yeah, I can only imagine in his head, he's like, don't tell her I'm sick. Don't tell her I'm sick. Don't tell her I'm sick. Are you sick? Oh, God, how did she know?
You had to ask me.
I think you're 100% right also, Brooke. I totally agree with you. That is funny. So then after this, we get a scene of Riker, and this was in the trailer also. He's in the kitchen, and looks like he's grating cheese, like a lot of cheese. And we hear Kestra yelling.
If he puts that much pizza on his cheese. If he puts that much cheese on his pizza, I'd probably eat it for sure.
I
love they were making pizza.
Yeah.
When you go to the Olive Garden, the guy's like, "Say when," and you're like, "Yeah, you're just gonna have to stop because I'm never gonna tell you to stop."
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, but
you're right.
I love.
It was like that guy.
I love that she's like, Jean-Luc Picard is here, and he's like, what? And then he doesn't see him outside, and JL is right behind him.
Yeah, JL. I do like that scene. I do love that scene, and of course Riker's got his jazz music playing. When he sees Picard, he gives him such a huge bear hug. It was just this. I loved it. It made me want a big bear hug from Jonathan Frakes too. Like I wish he would hug me that way.
Riker, you talking about being emotional, like in some of these scenes. I mean, this one got me. Like, I don't think any of these actors have like phoned it in. Don't get me wrong from what I'm about to say, but I think Jonathan Frakes really was excited to play this character again, and I think you can see that in all of his line delivery and everything that he does. I mean. Definitely aged once again, just like everything else. And I don't just mean physically. I mean just the attitude towards things and everything. Age, but still the most Riker-like, the most original character-like of everybody that we've seen so far from the original series or from Next Generation or Voyager or whatever. And it made me feel like I was watching like a Next Gen episode for a second. And that's where I get like really, kind of worked up.
Yeah, Jonathan Frakes had done an interview right around when he was filming these scenes for this episode, where he said that he had not, he's done more work behind the camera in the last, I would say at least decade, and he hasn't acted, terribly much, but it's been mostly directing. And so when they approached him to come back and do this part, he said he was actually quite nervous to come back in front of the camera and play Will Riker. He was nervous to play the part, but that once he got on set and then kind of fell into the role and kind of reconnected on screen with Marina Sirtis as Deanna, and then Picard's there. It all came back to him, he said. So I think for sure when you talk about like the desire to really portray these characters well, I think 100% you're right about Jonathan Frakes wanting to do a great job playing Will Riker, even if it's just for an episode.
Yeah. Like
he wanted to do that character justice.
Okay, do you think it was just an episode since you brought that up?
I mean, why would he go back at this point to them? Okay,
so I thought that all the cameos are people that we're going to see that we're familiar with, like 7 or 9, and Hugh and Riker and Troy. I definitely always thought they were 1 to 2 episode story arc and done, as we've seen, like 7 of 9, just a glimpse of one episode and then the whole episode next time. But then at the end of this episode, we see preview for the future. Of course, there's 7 and 9 again. Yeah. So that kind of made me think about that. And then when Riker says, by the way, I'm still on active reserve.
Right.
And he's like, oh, so you're thinking about getting out there? He goes, well, it would have to be a really special mission. I mean, why say that? If and I don't know if it's this season, but I don't think it's the last time we see Riker.
Interesting.
I mean, just like in the All Good Things. He was an admiral behind a desk, and it was the Enterprise was mothballed, and then all of a sudden at the end of the episode we see Riker back behind the bridge that we didn't expect him to see coming to the rescue. And I don't know, I feel like maybe a very similar scene like that we might get either at the end of this season or in season 2. Because why? What's the point?
I bet because